Thank you to the RAF Association for inviting me to do this talk today. I'm often out and about giving talks, but as you can imagine right now I'm stuck at home. This is my dining room with my fancy fish wallpaper that I get both compliments and not so compliments about. So it's great to actually be able to do a talk. It's quite exciting for me, so thank you very much. Yeah, so as Amy says, my name is Jess. I'm from the Royal Air Force Museum. I've been working on a project called RAF Stories for over 3 years now. And so today I thought I'd tell you a bit about the project, and then I thought I'd share with you some of the fantastic content that we've managed to capture during the project, really. So yeah, we'll give it a go. There's some video clips in this, so hopefully you'll be able to enjoy some of these video clips and they work okay, so we'll see how we get on with that. And also, one quick disclaimer, I do have my dogs with me today, so if you do hear an eruption of barking, yeah, that's them. So we'll try and talk over them if that happens, but they're normally very, very well behaved. It's just if a squirrel makes their way into the garden, which they do quite often at the minute. Yeah, so with that, we'll crack on then. So this presentation is aged slightly now. We started the project to mark the centenary of the Royal Air Force. So I'm sure you remember all the fantastic events that happened at that time, the fly pasts, all of that fantastic stuff to mark that great occasion. So the Royal Air Force Museum got funding from the National Heritage Lottery Fund to mark this occasion. And I don't know if any of you have visited our site in London recently, but it underwent a huge renovation, lots of new exhibitions, and that was kind of the central part of that funding that we got. But there was also a number of programmes, such as educational aspects and all sorts of different little projects on the side. And RAF Stories was one of those. That was our digital project. And it was all about sort of capturing the people of the RAF to go alongside all the fantastic technology that we show in our museums as it is. So RAF Stories came about, and that's why I joined the museum. I'll tell you a bit about me and my background. So that's me there with the camera interviewing. That's how I'm normally sat as I collect people's memories. I'm an oral historian, I suppose I'd call myself. So I specialise in the recording of people's life stories. I've done this for absolutely ages now, and done it on very different projects. That's just sort of my specialism. It doesn't matter what topic it's about. It's just about trying to record those people's memories. So I'm not by any stretch a military historian or an expert on military history. My specialism is in actually recording these stories and helping people to tell their own stories. So RAF Stories then has turned into this big story collecting project. We have a website where all these stories end up, and the aim is to record as many people as we can, really, with any sort of connection to the Royal Air Force. So that could be veterans, as you'd expect. It could be people who are currently serving, and they're really interesting to interview. Air cadets as well. So I think we've probably had the youngest person be about 13-year-old who wanted to tell us about their first loop that they've done and how that's inspired them to look at a career in the Air Force, right up to sort of your 97-year-old veterans who have, incredible stories, as you imagine. We get a lot of family stories as well. It's turned out to be quite an interesting way to memorialise people. So family stories that have maybe been passed across over the Christmas dinner table. Those anecdotes have been really important for us as well. So we capture all these sorts of different stories. So yeah, I mean, I don't think my parents could believe that's my job, that I have the great privilege of just sitting and chatting with people and hearing their life stories. But I just find that so much more interesting than reading loads of textbooks about subjects. I love just hearing that firsthand knowledge and those emotions and that sort of experience that they went through firsthand. So yeah, that's essentially me and what I do and what the project is. Just to give you an idea, I will show this little montage of people. This is only a very small handful of people that we have recorded as part of this project. So you'll see young and old and different backgrounds. You'll spot a ferret as well. Yes, we interviewed a chap and his ferret that he had at an RAF station. And yeah, it's fantastic to be able to speak to so many people from different backgrounds doing very different roles in the Royal Air Force. So that's just a little snapshot there. And so now we have over 500 stories on our website. And what I mean by stories are, we've taken long form interviews. So sometimes it could be a couple of hours, sometimes it could be half an hour. It just depends how much people want to share with us. And then we edit those down into little 2-minute clips, because that's what we find our visitors like to digest, nice short little stories. And we obviously have the longer footage that goes into our archive, and everything then is available for future exhibitions and lectures and things like that. So we utilise these things in lots of different ways. And one of these ways is obviously talks like I'm doing today. And so instead of just me witter on about various aspects about the project, I always really like to let the content speak for itself. So what I've put together is some short clips from 4 of the most inspiring women that I've met during this process. I've kind of put them in a sort of chronological order, and so I'll stitch the context between them. But really what I'll do is let you see them talk for themselves about their own experiences. So yeah, we'll start then with this lady, Catherine de Platte-Taylor. She was a very fierce woman. I absolutely adored her. I thought she was brilliant. She was 96. She was messaging me on her iPad. And when I met her, she was just a force, you know, one of those ladies that's not afraid to correct you if you're wrong in the slightest. And I absolutely adored that about her. So Catherine had been part of the WAF, the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, and she was one of the ladies who was in the operations rooms. So we've got a little picture there that you can see of the plotting. So she was listening with the headsets and then marking on the maps and feeding this information on. You know, she was doing a very important job, a very secret job. She couldn't tell anybody about it. She was often sort of stationed in like country houses away from the main air bases because they wanted to keep them safe and secure. But also at one point in her fantastic career, she was based 90 feet under Dover Castle as part of those that were plotting crashes that happened over the Channel. And she believes that her and her colleagues at the time, they saved the lives of hundreds of people that crashed over the Channel. So she'd send that information on to pilots who would then try their best to save those that had been stranded in the Channel. But I will let her share a few stories. The first one that I'm going to show you, it shows you the sort of lady she was really. It's about why she decided to join the WAF. When she was from quite a privileged background really, and it was quite an unexpected thing for her to want to have done. So this shows you a little bit of her humour.
I volunteered when I was 18. My mother signing the form saying they'll never take you, you're far too young. And they were a bit miffed because she wanted me to go to a domestic science college in Edinburgh. And I didn't want to because she didn't think it was at all right for women were there to look after men because poor men, they couldn't manage without us, which is true. There
you go, that was her sort of wicked sense of humour that she had. But this next clip I'm going to show you from Catherine is perhaps a good example of why I love oral history so much, because you can really feel the emotion in this next story.
But then I was moved up to Coltishall, near Norwich. And from there we did pathfinders. Mosquitoes they were. You'd count them out with their incendiary bombs. You knew the call sign, usually, of the boy you were dancing with the night before. And you would wait for the chaps, for the call signs of the lads you knew to come as they came up, as they came over the North Sea, they'd get increased height, so that they came within the scope of the radar. And you'd hear their call sign, and you'd say, "Oh, that's Johnny, and that's Brian." And I remember one of the corporals was going out with one of the pilots, and her boy didn't come. That was terrible. But there you are. That's war.
Yeah, so you can really sort of feel her emotion with that in that story, and yeah, absolutely loved that. So on to our next lady. I think Jackie Moggridge has got to be one of my favourite stories that has come out of this whole project. I would just love to be her. She was brilliant. She was a daredevil. She was master of all trades. She was just a fantastic lady. Unfortunately, I didn't get to meet her. She passed away, but her youngest daughter is so passionate on keeping her story alive that I had a fantastic talk with Candida, her daughter, who shared me all of her childhood memories of her mum, which again have become some of my favourite stories. But Jackie, she was born in South Africa. She got a private pilot's licence over there, and with the breakout of war, she wanted to come over to assist because she knew she could fly. So she joined the Air Transport Auxiliary, which you'll know were set up to help transport aircraft from factories to RAF bases and all across the place, the country and abroad. And so the WAFs never got to do anything like flying, really. They did more of the sort of jobs that Catherine were kind of doing, whereas now with the ATA, women found a place where they could fly. So you would have heard of Spitfire girls, and so Jackie Moggridge very much fits that bill. But it wasn't just Spitfires that she was flying, it could be any number of aircraft. And you might know that it was very dangerous because they didn't always have all of the kit fitted into the aircraft at that point, particularly navigation equipment. So it was known to be fairly dangerous, and people like Amy Johnson lost their lives in service. But I did see Jackie's, she had like a training manual, and it was one very small page per aircraft that she had to learn, because she never had any time to practice in any of these aircraft. She just had to read this little sheet, get in, and know how to fly the aircraft. And I just think that's incredible, because I could read some instructions about an IKEA cupboard and not be able to put it together, but she managed to read a piece of paper and fly an aircraft perfectly. So yeah, she's fantastic. And I mentioned she was a daredevil. She did a parachute jump back in her hometown, and she was interested in the sound barrier as well, which I'll tell you a bit more about in a minute. But first, I'll play this clip from her daughter, Candida, who I think it's probably one of my favourite stories, a childhood memory. But to set a bit of context, she talks about the Grace Spitfire, which was a Spitfire that was restored by Carolyn Grace, which she had discovered. Jackie Moggridge had been the first person in the logbook and found Jackie Moggridge's family to share this news, and this sort of helped this story come together.
My memories are in the mornings, I'd get into bed and just before school, and she'd say, "Come on, let's pretend we're flying a Spitfire." And the duvet can be the clouds. And she said, "Right, we've got to pretend, we've got to hold the joystick." Now, she said it's very, very, very sensitive. So it's a very noisy plane, and you feel the whoosh of the engine and the thrust as you go up. And then she said, if you want to turn right, you just think you want, don't move, just think it, and imperceptibly you will turn right. And if you want to go left, just think it, and it will go left. And you've got to level the plane up with the horizon and keep it level with the horizon, the nose with the horizon. So she taught me all this. But later on, when my mother died, I thought it would be nice to give her ashes over an aerodrome. So I rang Carolyn Grace and said, "Look, do you know a pilot who could possibly do this for me, just over Dunkerswell, our local aerodrome?" And she said, "Well, it'll be me in the Grace." She said, "We'll come and do it." I was absolutely amazed. And so when she came to do that wonderful thing, she brought the Spitfire down and she let me go up in it. She said when we got up, right, Candy, okay, you can take over now. So I took over and I thought, I know what I've got to do. Line it up with the horizon, keep it steady. She said, oh, that's good. She said, now turn right. I thought, I know what to do. Just think. And I just thought, I didn't move. I just thought, I tell you, it goes beautifully to the right. And she went, oh my goodness me, she said, you're your mother's daughter. And I thought, well, I've never flown a plane in my life. But those lessons in that bed worked.
I just love that story because I think it's so well-rounded. It's sort of that childhood experience of your mum being this exciting Spitfire pilot and teaching you what to do in bed, and then, you know, to Mark, such a wonderful woman in her life, to be able to fly in her Spitfire and sort of kind of know what you're doing. I think it's just an adorable story, and I love that. But I mentioned she had aspirations about the sound barrier. She wanted to be the first woman to break the sound barrier. She knew that there was a lady in France and a lady in America who were trying to race to get to that marker. And she knew that she could do it, but she just needed a fast jet. And she wrote to many people in the RAF. She wrote to royalty, begging for somebody to lend her a fast jet so that she could compete to do this. But unfortunately, you know, it was wartime. They didn't really have the aircraft to spare, and they weren't going to spare it on this. So she didn't become the first woman to break the sound barrier, but she did eventually break the sound barrier. And that's important information for you to know for this next clip, which I think is another one of my favourite stories.
My mother always loved driving, right up to, well, she was still driving when she died at 84. I think if someone had taken away her car, she would have just died anyway, because to her, if she couldn't fly a plane, then the car was the next best thing. And so she was driving up to London, and she was driving around Hyde Park Corner, and the police stopped her. And I think they thought, oh, this drunk driver, we've got to find out who this driver is. So they stopped her and were really surprised to find this little old lady at the wheel, and she got told off for driving too slowly. And my brother-in-law always said, if only they'd known that she was the woman who'd been through the sound barrier. She'd flown in all these planes, and she then got stopped for driving too slowly around Hyde Park Corner.
Again, I just love that because it's one of those don't judge a book by its cover sort of things, isn't it? Where they saw this little old lady, but she'd done incredible things with her life. Before we move on to Julie, I just wanted to say that Jackie stayed with the RAF. She was served with them in the RAF Reserves for a while with 4 other ladies. They went on to get their RAF wings. They're not known if they were sort of the full RAF wings or not. There's a bit of contention about that, but I believe there's sort of books and maybe a TV show on the way to explore whether these 5 ladies were the first women to get full RAF wings or not. And I should say she also went on to become a commercial airline pilot with Channel Airways. And there's lots of glamorous photos of her about with her and her air hostesses, because it was quite unusual at that time, and she was such a glamorous woman. So she really did have a full career in being a pilot afterwards. But now to the lady on the screen. This is Julie Gibson, and so she was given the official recognition as the first female pilot in the Royal Air Force. Normally at this point I do a bit of guesswork, but it might be a bit difficult with us today. So I'll just leave a bit of a gap for you to think of the answer, and then I will reveal it. But with the other audiences, I normally sort of ask, when do you think this might have been? When did Julie Gibson get her first, when did she become the first female pilot and get her wings? If you just have a look at the photos, I'll try and get people to work out if they can tell when those photos might have been taken. A lot of people at my talks, they guess it might have been the 60s or the 70s, but I'm sure you might know better. It was actually the 90s, and a lot of people tend to be shocked because it doesn't seem that long ago, really. But it was 1989 when the RAF opened up applications for women to be a pilot. And when she completed all her training, she got her wings in 1991. So yeah, it shocked some people. So there we go. So I really enjoyed meeting Julie. She was a fantastic lady. She didn't really subscribe to all the hype about being the first woman. She just wanted to get on and do her job. She had a lot of pressure and media attention on her, as you can probably imagine at the time. But I think the way she dealt with that is she developed a fantastic sense of humour. So I thought that's what I'd show from you today. Is there's 3 clips of her in slightly funny circumstances where people are a bit confused about why this lady should be the captain of a giant Hercules aircraft, because I guess they just weren't expecting it at that time. So here, I'll let you hear from Julie.
When the announcement was made for female aircrew, that I think some people found that quite shocking. I think not everybody, and I think some people were opposed to that idea. However, no one I ever worked with was openly against women pilots. I think I heard a couple of times, I don't really believe in women pilots, but you're okay, Julie, or something like that. There were lots of funny moments when I got my wings and was flying as a female pilot in the RAF, particularly involving people outside the Air Force. I remember in one country we had stopped overnight. I was flying the Hercules, and we have a weather briefing in the morning, and the person giving the briefing came in with paperwork and went to the tallest member of the crew and said, "Captain," and he said no, and so they went through the navigator and the engineer and the co-pilot and the load master, all men, and then they all pointed at me and said, "No, she's the captain." And so that was quite funny in that it wasn't recognised straight away. And there were plenty of other times when I landed somewhere and people didn't realise that actually I'd been flying the aircraft. I remember once we went to pick up some passengers to bring them back to the UK, and I think we met them the night before. So I was in civvy clothing, and some other conversation got round to female pilots, and I think one of these passengers said, "Oh, well, I wouldn't fly with a female pilot," or something, and so we didn't say anything that night. The next day, in uniform, I think my crew pretended I'd been really offended, and I hadn't. I just thought it was really funny, and so I think that particular passenger was said, "Look, you've got 5 minutes to get off the aircraft if you want. You said you wouldn't fly with a female pilot. You can leave now." Of course, he didn't. He looked very sheepish, but he did stay on board.
So there we go. That's a few little stories from Julie Gibson. And of course, we know that all sorts of roles open then for women after that. Apart from the RAF Regiment, and that was fairly recently, wasn't it? And I think over the last month or so, the First Lady has got through the training for the regiment. Might be wrong on that, but I think that's something that I heard now. But until that point, Michelle Partington was the nearest that I had to somebody who had been out on the front line with the RAF Regiment. So that's bringing us a bit more up to date now. This is the last lady that I'm going to tell you about. Another really inspiring lady, because she has been sort of through hell and back and made a recovery, and so can talk so eloquently about the struggles that she's had during her career as a paramedic. So some of these clips, they're a bit harder to watch, they can be a little bit graphic about what she saw out there. I hope you don't mind me showing them, because I think they are still very important stories and things for people to share. At the museum, we're very interested in people that have developed PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and sharing their stories and experiences as well. So I hope you don't mind me showing these today. I think they are important. So Michelle was the first woman out on the front line with the RAF as a paramedic. The first clip I'm going to show you is a bit about her time there as a woman and how she found that. And then we'll show some clips about the sort of things that she witnessed while she was out there.
To be honest, my first tour was as the first female with the RAF Regiment out on the ground. So it was like a ground paramedic going around on patrols and doing everything that they did. And it was a massive thing to get a female onto that. And the main stress was before I went, because there were people saying, oh, you can't do that, we can't have a female, we can't have this, we can't have that. And I'm like, why? You know? And for me, I was pretty stubborn. I was like, I want to do it. I want to prove that we can do it. And as personal, as an achievement for me, but to prove to others that actually it doesn't matter what you've got between your legs. If you can do a job, you're fit enough and agile enough and in the right frame of mind, you can do anything you want. So I was pushing and pushing hard. I was working with the regiment guys, doing foot patrols, doing my fitness tests, getting up to the standard and beyond where I needed to be, so that I could continue with the foot patrols and I wasn't a hindrance to anybody. And I had to say to the powers that be, we can do this, because they were like, oh, well, you'll need a separate admin area, won't you? You'll need a separate tent. You don't have tents in the middle of Afghan. You put your bed out and that's it, your little, mozzie tent, and that's you. So, and you shelter sheet up if needs be, and that's it. So if the other lads are walking off with a shovel and their rifle to go to the toilet, what's the difference between them doing it and me doing it? So I didn't bother with any of that, and we just mucked in. And for the first week or so, it was really, really hard, because you have to prove yourself to the lads, because they're going to have a little bit of a stigma towards it as well, saying, oh, a woman can't do this job. And there was a small amount of that. But I proved myself quite early on, so then that went, and I just became one of the lads, and that was one of the best tours the best tour I'd ever done. And I guess, for me, I see that as the making of who I really am as a person.
Okay, so that was a bit of a background to her time out there. So this next clip is a bit more about the sort of things she had to deal with as a paramedic out there.
Mentally preparing for treating blast wounds and things is quite difficult. So the training that we had was the best it could have been, even to the point where we had amputees in action that came in, and there was fake blood, and it can be as real as it could be. And we had a simulated aircraft that all the noise was there, when it could, the vibrations were there and things, but nothing can prepare you for going out there and seeing it and doing it. Absolutely nothing. You can go into a hospital, you can go out onto the street as a paramedic, but I don't think any amount of training can prepare you for actually being there, because it's not only what you see, which is horrific, but it's the smells, the sounds, the taste of blood in your mouth. And in my first sort of few jobs, I was kneeling on the mangled limbs without realising that I was leaning on them and things. And you think back now, and some guy's leg had come off. So what we do when the casualty comes on, we take all their clothes off so we can see any other wounds or whatever. So I started taking this guy's boot off, and the whole foot came off. And I looked at it and I was like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? And it was like nothing can prepare you for them moments. And it's horrific. And what's even more horrific is the fact that you've just got to put that in a clinical waste pack and hand it in with the patient when you go to hospital. What prepares you for that sort of thing? So I froze on my first call. When I first went out on tour, I completely froze when I saw the patient coming on. And I'd done all the training, I'd passed everything, but I just like, what do? I froze. So, yeah. I mean, obviously, after a split second I was there, I was in it, but I was shocked, absolutely shocked at what I saw.
Yeah, so a little bit more graphic, that video, but I think it's important to sort of show the sort of experiences that she was having out there, because, I can't even imagine, and I think that was part of the problem for Michelle, was it was sort of, didn't seem like real life, it seemed sort of like a strange movie that she was part of. So as you can imagine, dealing with this sort of stuff every day, it took a toll on her mental health, and this next video shows you sort of to where she'd got to with her mental health.
The first Mert tour, so much blast injuries, so much blast injuries, but you got used to it. You got used to the blast injuries. You knew how to manage it. You got into a routine of dealing with them. But when I returned to the UK, my friends and my fiance at the time were saying to me, oh, you're a bit quieter than you used to be, and you're a bit more withdrawn. I wasn't going out so much. I didn't realise, it was quite subtle what was happening. But I got to Bryce for what was to be my final tour, and I felt sick at the thought of going back. I should have put my hand up and said I'm not ready, but I didn't. And got out there, and I was literally up here, anxiety-wise, for most of it. Most of the shouts were more gunshot wounds than blasts, and they were in places that were quite futile, so we couldn't save that many. So it was horrendous. Day after day after day of this was just, it was awful. And then I was having nightmares at night. I couldn't come down from it on our rest days, which weren't really rest days. I actually was running off the helicopter by the end of that final tour, thinking, do you know what, if I got shot, it didn't matter. Because if I got shot, it meant that I could either go home early or I'd be dead. And I could end the nightmare that I'd started to realise I was living in.
Yeah, so she got to a very dark point by the end, and she was medically discharged after being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. It's always quite a sad clip, and people always worry about Michelle, but I can promise you, she went through a difficult time. She became agoraphobic. She couldn't leave the house, but she did get better. She got some help. She was introduced to the Invictus Games, as you can see the photo on the screen, which is the tournament that Prince Harry set up for veterans and service personnel with injuries or any mental illness. And this really helped her. She's now great. She is doing lots of work with mental health charities and all that sort of stuff. And so because everyone was worried about her when I do this talk, I've added a little audio update about how Michelle found the Invictus Games and what that did for her.
So Invictus for me was so much more than just the sport, which was a good thing because I was pretty poor at it. They promised that I would, not promise because you can't promise anything. They said that it's all about the recovery. And I was a little bit sceptical because I was just totally lost. And I was sceptical initially about what it could do for you and what it was about. For it to be for work, I had to be realistic about what I was going to be able to achieve. And for me, it was about getting that fire back in my belly, getting that focus back and wanting a purpose again. And, being around other veterans, but also being around people that wanted to help mattered. So it gave me purpose again. I had somewhere to go, I had to get up, and with the training, I had to eat properly because I'd been existing and living off toast and biscuits because I'd lost interest in doing anything. I was so unfit, my weight was piling on, I was just, yeah. So for me, health-wise, it improved it both mentally and physically. It's given me more focus and it's actually given me, I want to do more now and I want to use my bad experience, actually I can turn it round and using it in a positive way and it's working and that's what it's done for me.
There we go. So that was Michelle. We think it's really important to share these sort of stories because I guess they can kind of put things in perspective really, that people can go through so much and come out the other side still fighting. And we have a lot of stories about the Invictus Games that are equally as interesting should you want to look at any more of those. So I'm going to wrap it up a little bit. I'm going to tell you a bit about our website and our app and show you a quick video about how you might use the app if you are interested. But those were my lovely 4 very inspiring women, and I hope you enjoyed their stories. So if you did enjoy their stories, if you go to our website, rafstories.org, as I said, there are over 500 of these little stories there that you can find. You can search. So if you liked any of the ladies today, you can search their names. Many more stories of theirs will come up. You could search Invictus and many Invictus Games stories come up. You could search for a Spitfire and people who had experience with the Spitfire will come up. All sorts of different ways that you can search for on that. So if you've got a bit of spare time, as we all seem to have at the minute, I do encourage you to have a look at that. There's hopefully something for everybody. As part of the project, we also launched the RAF Stories app, which is free to download on smartphones and tablets. That was made so that you could add your own story. So if you have your own experience or say somebody in your family has, you could use this time where we're all in lockdown to tell some of your own story or that family story. What you submit through the app comes straight to us and to this wonderful online collection, and it really helps our collection grow. So we're always after some new stories if people want to share them. So I'll just play a very quick video that gives you the gist of how the app might work to see if you might fancy it. So here we go with that.
The RAF Stories app gives you all the tools you need to record stories and share them with the RAF Stories website. Visit rafstories.org to learn more about the project, and then download the app to your phone or tablet to get recording and get involved. The app has a fully featured help page with guides on how to record, detail and share your stories, but in this video we're going to quickly run through the basics of recording an audio story. Ready to record your RAF story? The warm-up option offers you the chance to prepare some questions beforehand and enter some information about the person you're going to interview, but for this film we're just going to dive straight in. We need to know who you are recording. Put their name in here. You can choose to record audio or video. It's easier to start with audio recordings while you get used to the process, so we'll choose audio. Tap the microphone button to start recording. The timer runs for 2 minutes, but you can add more time if you need it. Tap the stop button when you're done. You can listen back to your recording and decide if you're happy with it or if you'd like to have another go. Now you'll be asked to take a photo. This could be a snap of the person you have interviewed or something else that helps to illustrate the story. Now we are at the Story Builder page. Here we want you to add as much information as you can. This will help people discover your story and link it to similar stories on the site. You can also add additional photos if you have any. When you're ready, tap Submit Your Story. You'll be sent an email when your story is live. Why don't you download the app today and help tell the story of the RAF?
So there we go. I hope that might have taken your interest, and if any of you do have any stories that you want to share, you might have a go with the app. It's fairly simple once you get the hang of it, and there's plenty of guides on it to help guide you through it as well as that video that you can find on our website. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed today and that you might like to take part. I should mention that the museum is obviously closed with everything that's going on, but should you want to visit when we reopen, we'd very much welcome you to, because we'd love your support again once all of this is over. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope that was of some interest to you this morning.